Alright, now I wasn't expecting to do another video quite so soon, but this game was very notable, and I just wanted to show it. So we are playing against Leovold, Emissary of Trest, generally a pretty high tier commander in this format. He does take some top spots, so this is certainly a matchup that I want to be at least wary of. My hand seems pretty good. I have turn 1 Inquisition into turn 2 Live Fast, so I'm feeling relatively comfortable. I'm going to keep this. Leovold's a pretty interesting deck because it has two main strategies, both of which are kind of combo-oriented. One being Teferi's Puzzle Box, and the other being a Reanimator strategy with some form of combo. So I Inquisition and see 5 lands, Fyndhorn Elves, Mystical Tutor. I'm obviously going to take Mystical Tutor, since often that'll be Days Undoing or Time Twister or some other nonsense, leaving my opponent with a hand of 5 lands and Fyndhorn Elves. So I'm feeling very confident right now. They can certainly drop a turn 2 Leovold, but without anything to follow it up with, that doesn't really do that much. I don't need to target them or their creatures. So they play Fyndhorn Elves. I do my plan of just casting Live Fast, finding Victim of the Night. Great for killing Leovold. And really what you need against Leovold if you don't have counter magic is instant speed removal, and you'll see why in just a minute. So here comes turn 2 Leovold as expected, and I decide to actually just play Gonti here. The reason I do this is because I could play Mind Stone, keep up Victim of the Night, or I could Sign in Blood. Neither of those seems super appealing. What I want to do is try to get some form of interaction from my opponent, because while I do have some, you really can't have too much against this deck. It's very fast and tempo oriented, and now unfortunately I didn't really realize this at the time, is that Gonti triggers Leovold because obviously it targets, in 1v1 you always have one target, so it's not really a big deal, but regardless. I find a Diabolic Edict for my opponent, as well as 2 lands and some Converge card that I can't cast. And my opponent just goes ahead and casts turn 4 Teferi's Puzzle Box anyway, despite starting with a hand of 5 lands and Fyndhorn Elves. They still get turn 3 Teferi's Puzzle Box lock on time. So if you haven't run into this before, the way this works is Leovold says you can't draw more than 1 card per turn, and Teferi's Puzzle Box says during your draw step, bottom deck your hand and draw a new one. And since that's during your draw step, you've already drawn a card this turn, so you draw no cards after you put your hand back. The only way to stop this once it's come down, removal on the box doesn't stop it for the first upkeep. The only thing that actually does anything against this is instant speed removal on Leovold, and thankfully I have that exact thing. So I'm going to kill Leovold and draw a card as normal, and then ship my hand back and draw a new one. Now the hand I get is very mana intensive, so I'm just going to deploy all the mana I can right now because I have really no reason to hold back. Teferi's Puzzle Box means that these 2 cards that I have right now are going to go away. And I'll get new ones. Now I could have Diabolic Edicted here to get rid of Fyndhorn Elves, and I think in retrospect it's a better play, because if my opponent draws a land, they can just recast Leovold and I'm back in the lock. I don't do that for whatever reason, so I take that risk, and fortunately for me, my opponent does not have a 4th land. So instead they just cast Jace Prodigy, as well as Go for the Throat on Cryptcast, which is relatively fine by me. I still have a ton of mana, so I dump back my 3 cards and get 3 new ones, 3 very good ones as it happens, so I can Ultimate Price and Diabolic Edict, removing my opponent's 2 creatures, and get down Coercive Portal. So my opponent can't play Leovold this turn, barring Ancient Tomb or similar, and I'll get at least 1 turn with the portal up before I'm back in the lock. My opponent Diabolic Tutors here, and this is the first time that I think my opponent might not be as familiar with the deck as they perhaps could be, because they Diabolic Tutor, or rather, they Demonic Tutor with Teferi's Puzzle Box up, so unless they drew something that's instant speed, that card will go away on their next turn. And as it turns out, they don't actually use it, so I'm not sure what they were doing there. Anyway, I get 3 new cards, which in this case includes the Abyss, which is pretty good for me. Now, unfortunately, this will trigger Leovold every time that it kills one of their creatures, but it will also hopefully keep Leovold off the board, and that if they don't keep drawing creatures to feed to the Abyss, Leovold will eventually die. That won't be the case this turn, of course, since they have Mystic to back it up, but that's relatively fine. I get to kill Gonti and recast Gonti, which is one of the reasons I love the Abyss in this deck. It's constantly more Gonti forever. So, I cast Gonti, my opponent gets to draw another card, and I get Primeval Titan. Now, I don't really have a choice about letting my opponent draw cards because I need cards to play, and I'm just hoping that they won't draw anything relevant in time. They go ahead and Intuition, and here's where the reanimation plan comes online. So if you didn't see that, that was very fast. They selected Necrotic Ooze, Phyrexian Devourer, and Razaketh, the Foul-Blooded. Now, I know this is in part a reanimation deck, and if they have Razaketh in the graveyard, any reanimation spell they have is essentially game-winning. So I can't put that in the graveyard. I'll put Necrotic Ooze and Phyrexian Devourer in the graveyard. It's still missing one of the pieces that makes this an instant win combo, so I'm not as concerned as I am with Razaketh. This requires them to have some sort of Entomb effect plus reanimation, whereas putting Razaketh in the graveyard would make reanimation a win. Anyway, the best clears off the Elvish Mystic. I'm hoping that they don't draw a creature in this next spin of the puzzle box. As it turns out, they draw Verdant Catacombs, which is just as good because Dryad Arbor is a very good card, and they go ahead and put down Sylvan Library as well as Dismembering Gonti. I'm not super sure why they dismembered Gonti. They spent 4 life to deal me 3 damage. I guess it's worth it. Either way, I'm actually going to play Primeval Titan here rather than Gonti because it gives me more time to use the card that I get off Gonti in terms of actually having mana to cast it, so I get Herb Cabal Coffers. This will give me all the mana I need to keep recasting Gonti forever, so unless they can find an actual win condition, I can actually try to come back in this game. On their turn, the Dryad Arbor dies, they Sylvan Library, Frantic Search, Teferi's Puzzle Box. They have a lot of digging power, and they discard Terastodon and some other thing. And here's where it becomes very clear that I've made the right choice in not putting Razaketh in the graveyard because they do have Exhume. I can bring back Cryptghast, which gives me more mana, and they Terastodon targeting Thran Dynamo, Coercive Portal, and the Abyss. And I think this is very, very wrong for them to do. You'll see that they're currently at 18 life, but I still have a ton of mana, and I can still recast Gonti, and they're giving me a lot of creatures that they have to actually deal with. So I completely disagree with my opponent's play here, and we'll see whether or not it pays off for them. They go ahead and Night's Whisper down to 16 life. Teferi's Puzzle Box gets rid of the card that I would have drawn, but now with all my mana, I can cast Gonti, Extorting, and what I find for my opponent here, after they draw a card, is Grim Tutor. And Grim Tutor makes this a pretty easy win, as it turns out. I mess up here. I take a very suboptimal line. I Grim Tutor for Yawgmoth's Will, which eventually turns out to be just getting ultimate price, so that was clearly a mistake. But regardless, it just allows me to kill Terastodon and then attack in for what turns out to be lethal. So my point in showing you this video is kind of twofold. Actually, is this lethal? Let's see, they block a token, they take 6, and then 6, and then 2. Yep, that's exactly game. So my point in showing this video is kind of twofold. One, if your opponent has what seems like an impossible lock of Teferi's Puzzle Box Leovold, don't scoop, because your opponent could make a mistake and you could get lucky, both of which happened here to let me win the game. And the second point that I want to make is if your opponent shows you a hand of 5 lands and Fyndhorn Elves, don't assume that they won't just draw broken cards, because as it turns out, with that hand they only need to draw Teferi's Puzzle Box to get the turn 3 lock online. So with those two phrases of wisdom, I suppose, that's about the end of this video. I just thought it was a cool replay, and have a good night.